Welcome to the Campus Salt Show. This will be our final episode for the 2020-2021 school year. And this time we have Luke Olsen will be with us. He's the student body president and also pursuing an accounting degree. So let's dive into the interview. All right. So Luke, to start with, could you tell us a little bit about the BTC programs that you are in or were in?
Yeah, absolutely. So I've just graduated in April with my AAST in accounting, and I now have business management and medical office administration AASTs to finish in the next 2 years.
Cool. So what was it that led you to change careers and pursue accounting?
Right. So initially, for a long time, I worked as a construction worker, had my own business, and then I was injured on the job, which forced me to change a career from a manual labor to a mental taxing career. I initially just went to go get the accounting certificate, but the advisors really persuaded me to think about the associate's degree, and now I've snowballed into getting 3 degrees. So here we are.
Cool. And what's your favorite aspect of accounting so far?
You know, so far it's anytime there's a mystery. I mean, that's, I like to try and solve the problem if there's a missing number. I want to find it. If there's questions from somebody who doesn't know accounting, that is almost as fun because then you have to word everything in English to make sense to somebody who's never seen a credit or a debit.
Yeah. Can you tell us a little bit more about the accident that caused you to change careers?
Yeah, absolutely. So when I was working in construction, I was working alone on a job site, and I was tasked with fixing a bent multi-family home mailbox. So those things are, I think, 36 boxes with the package boxes. They weigh about 350 pounds. And when I was removing it, one of the bolts stripped off the nut and it hinged forward and it landed on me, and it actually knocked me out and pretty much destroyed my spine. And so the company I was working for wasn't very helpful. They didn't help me go to the doctor. They didn't tell me my rights. It took me a long time to actually report the accident, which made everything more compounded and difficult. But now everything is okay 4 years later.
Right.
So it just takes time.
Yeah, to work through that. And so you were knocked unconscious and you just came to underneath this mailbox?
Yeah, came to in the shade nicely underneath a box of metal that was crushing me. My sternum, I actually popped all of the ribs off my sternum, especially on the right side. So that took a really long time to heal. And I had a concussion for 9 months, so I don't actually remember the 9 months that I had the concussion. I was described as a goldfish in a bowl. I could walk into a room and ask a question, and as soon as I left the room, I'd forget what the answer was. Oh. Then from that, it was a lot of chiropractic work on my back, then a lot of physical therapy. And then in the end, I actually got an epidural, spinal injection in the L4, L5 bracket of my spine because basically I had almost torn my disc all the way through. And so it was just like a year of physical therapy to slowly rehabilitate myself. I ended up losing feeling in my right leg for about 8 months. And so I'm really glad that has come back. I don't have a walking stick anymore. I can go upstairs. I can do everything that's normal. But it is a long time. I was told that for every day my spine was injured, it would take 4 days to get better. And 3.5 years later, I can actually do things that I could do before I got hurt, which is nice.
Yeah, it's a long time. Are there any other events in your past that really impacted you personally like that?
There's been like, when your friend, a couple of my friends have gotten really depressed and they've committed suicide. So that's, like something I always think about. So between my accident and the hardships of losing friends to suicide or mental health problems, I don't take any day for granted or people. Like I talk with all my friends as much as I can. I talk with my family. I try and go out and exercise and enjoy the sun and enjoy everything that I can, because after my accident, who knows what happens? Maybe I leave here and I get hit by a bus and that was it. But at least I enjoyed it.
As mentioned in the interview, you are the president of the student body at BTC.
Yep.
Can you tell us a little bit about what you enjoyed most about being student government?
I really enjoyed being the face of the 2,000 students that we have on campus. Sometimes a little bit more than that, sometimes a little bit less, but that's a good average. For me, the reason I like it is I'm not shy in front of people. I like to talk to everyone. I want to hear your opinion and what you like or you don't like about going to the college, what we could make better, or things that might make you more engaged. And so this year I learned a lot when I was able to go on campus, which was few because of COVID. But every interaction I had, I tried to really engage the students that I talked to. I've had a lot of experience with working with faculty administration. Being an older student and going to college, I really wanted to network myself into the community and offer insight into things. So it's been an amazing experience to meet 5 other students who are just as dedicated to the job and wanted to do it all year. One of the best things that I have experienced through the ASBTC is being able to fund students that want to do things. We have money set aside for all of our students, all of our clubs, all of our organizations. It just sits there until a student asks for it. So trying to get students to find things to do was also difficult, but when they found them, we could support them and they could go do it. And so seeing students succeed and get entertained and not feel so isolated in a weird world has been extremely rewarding.
Yeah. Cool. What was one of the hardest things about being in student government this year?
Hardest thing this year, trying to engage students through social media. We have an average campus age of 35. A lot of the students are single parents or parents. A lot of the people who go have jobs. There's not really a big community of students that stay on campus. And so trying to engage older students through social media, quite honestly, is a little bit impossible because we don't use it.
Yeah.
Without that on-campus physical poster to show what we were doing, we were happy to have 3 students come, and that was success. Because if even one student showed up, at least one person's engaged.
Yep.
And I can't complain if one person shows up. If nobody shows up, then yes, I feel a little disappointed, but that didn't happen this year.
Yeah. Yeah, but you did have some events that had even more than, say, 3 students,
Yes.
right?
Yeah, we did. And so we had an amazing guy named Christian this year as our director of clubs and organizations. And he utilized the club directors to promote our events. He did a date and paint, which will now be a yearly event for BTC. And he brought in 50 students that did an online class for painting, and everyone got the canvas and paint supplies for free. So that was terrific. We've done a collaboration with some colleges. We did a collaboration with Whatcom Community College, Walla Walla Community College, and I think it was Western maybe, or another school. But it was just an online trivia night, and that slowly gained in popularity. And then we had a bunch of different schools with students having fun little rivalries with each other to see who could score the most points.
Yeah.
So it's just a little bit of things the little events that actually succeeded that really made a difference for the students that participated.
Yeah. Cool. If you could give just 2 pieces of advice to a new student coming into BTC, what would they be?
Time management is imperative. If you've never done time management skills and you don't know what to do about that, meeting with your school counselor, your student navigator, or a peer. Like, you need to set up a good schedule that allows you to do all of your homework and study, but also gives you time for yourself.
Yeah.
If you don't spend time for yourself, your time schedule is not going to matter because you're going to get so stressed out, you're just going to quit.
Yeah.
Second part to that would be always at least start your homework before it's due. Don't wait until the last minute. If you have a question and you're doing your homework at 11:30 at night, your teacher's not going to answer your questions. And you're going to have to either take a 0, guess, and hope you got it right, or figure it out before the homework is due at midnight.
Yeah.
And that's also not good. Like, if you're staying up that late and you then have to go to work the next day, or you have to go to school the next day, you're going to be tired. So, make sure that you get your homework done on time. Yep. It's going to make you feel better than procrastination.
Yep. So, Luke, transitioning to more personal things, are there any causes that you're particularly passionate about?
Yeah. My passion right now is to help the local community, especially individuals, and especially at school. Through the work that I've done at Bellingham Technical College, I've learned that if you're nice to other people and you can give them support and you can just listen to them, because a lot of people in the world today feel unheard. So if you can just listen to people and make them feel appreciated, everyone will start to act more compassionately towards other people. So since my accident, I don't take anything for granted. I like to try and make sure that if my friends are having a bad day, I'm not going to be able to solve it, but I can listen and let them know that they're not, suffering alone. As much as that, doesn't always help, it's still like, hey, you have someone who cares. So trying to find people who are in a rough place and just trying to pick them up.
Yeah. Since this show is sponsored by the Christian Club at BTC, I wanted to ask you a couple questions about your beliefs and your background. First off, can you tell us a little bit about your faith background?
Sure, absolutely. I was raised as a Roman Catholic, went to Assumption Catholic School here in town. And if you've never been to a Catholic school from 1st to 8th grade, it can really drag faith down. It doesn't make it fun. It makes it mandatory. And you lose track of where you're going. So when I graduated in the year 2000 from 8th grade, I hated God. I hated the idea of it. I didn't want anything to do with it.
Right. As
I grew older, I realized that there's no issue with God or faith or anything like that. It's just there are certain people who are toxic and they might use it in a toxic way.
Right.
So now I guess I'm questioning of faith. I have it in science, but science doesn't explain everything. And based around my accident, it sometimes makes me wonder, like, how did I survive? Why did I survive? Like, is there a greater purpose for me? And so hopefully going forward, I'll be able to wrap my brain around some of that. And if not, then I just will literally have to believe that I am here for something else and to continue work that maybe no one else can do, or I can join up with someone to continue working and partnership and make the community a better place.
What would you say about your beliefs currently? Would you call yourself an agnostic or atheist or something else?
I'd say that over my time as a student, over the last couple years, I started off, I would say, as an atheist. I couldn't really tell you why, other than like the idea that being forced to go to church for a couple years and then also being expected to go to church every Sunday, you just get tired of it.
Right.
But through meeting other people, kind of regaining my faith in humanity through meeting nice people at Bellingham Technical College and realizing that I enjoy talking with people, I've moved away from being atheist and being more accepting of all religions, because I don't know the right answer. I don't know if anyone knows the right answer, but if it makes you happy to believe in it, I see there's no problem there. I think that if your faith system is based off of scientific principles, that might take more faith than believing in an omnipotent being who put us here, just solely because the chances of life appearing is so small. Like, how can you not like that? If that's not faith, I don't know what is.
Yeah.
So that's where I started. And then the idea that the universe is so big, like, could it be possible that there's an omnipotent being? I don't know, but I'm okay with not knowing that question. So for me, I would just like to find a community of like-minded, accepting human beings, and sometimes that can only be found in a faith-based group.
Yeah.
And I think that everyone has a right to believe what they want to believe in. There might be some things that are more acceptable than others socially, but I don't see a problem with anyone having faith. And I think that if anyone wants to get involved, especially like on campus, your religion shouldn't matter. It just should be if you're interested or not. And if that's what you want to do, if that's who you want to help, then do it. Get involved.
Yeah. Yeah. For the signature question of the show, what is it that convinces you personally to believe what you believe?
These days, it's going to revolve back to the question about my accident. When you're told that you shouldn't be alive, it's scary. It makes you afraid because how many other people didn't survive that?
Right.
Like, what makes you different? Why? Like, there's more questions than there are answers. There's more questions the longer I think about it. And sometimes science can't explain it. And so I feel like maybe there's something out there that also saved me for another reason. I've had other friends that have had like horrifying accidents, but they've come out of it unscathed. And some of them have said, oh, we felt like a hand on our shoulder holding us down. And I was like, wow, well, maybe that same hand stopped me from being completely crushed.
Right.
You know, I was still given a hardship. I was still given a lesson to live with, something that I'll never forget, something that makes me different than other people. But at the same time, that scary incident reminded me that every single person's life is so delicate and hangs on the thinnest of threads that I guess what makes me believe in this is when I see the good in other people.
Cool. All right. Well, thank you very much, Luke, for being on the show, and it's been great to have you.
It's been a lot of fun. Thank you.
Yep. Welcome to the Understanding Jesus segment of the Campus Salt Show. Since this is our final episode for the 2020 to 2021 school year, we're going to step back a little bit from walking through the Gospel according to Mark, which is the earliest detailed document on Jesus of Nazareth. And I'm going to take this time to answer the signature question of the podcast. What is it that convinces me personally to believe what I believe? And that is that Jesus of Nazareth is actually the Messiah of Israel and the Savior of mankind. There are two things that really stand out for me that convince me, and I want to go in reverse order and talk about the second most important thing first. The second most important thing to me that really convinces me is the beauty and the power of Israel's prophecies and how they find their resolution in Jesus. And I don't mean by that a literal fulfillment, like, oh, there's this prophecy that something's going to happen in the year 2022, and then that exact thing happens in that exact year. Prophecy doesn't usually work like that. It's usually quite a bit more nuanced. There are a number of prophecies that run through the writing of Israel's prophets, and in these prophecies there's threads or themes that come together in amazing ways, and I'm going to just outline a few of them that mean a lot to me. One of them is the servant prophecies, and so those start with the writings of the prophet Samuel when he's comparing and contrasting Saul and David as two of Israel's kings, and you see Saul caving into peer pressure, not being willing to do what God asked him to do. And David, on the other hand, being God's servant. You know, God says, I haven't found anyone like this who's willing to do what I ask him to do. David is actually willing to be God's servant and do what he asks. And yet, as you get later in the prophet Samuel's writings, you find that even David isn't a good king. He commits adultery and ends up murdering the husband of the woman that he committed adultery with to cover it up. He's repentant, but he's just not a great king. And towards the end of the writing, you find that only God is really a good king for his people. And then as you continue to trace the servant prophecies, they wind up in the Psalms, the Messianic Psalms. And then finally in Isaiah, you have this idea of the servant. And God talks about how Israel as a nation was supposed to be his servant and was supposed to be a light to the other nations and a testimony, a witness to them. And yet they failed time and time again. There's also the shepherd prophecies where, like in Ezekiel and Jeremiah, you have God saying the leadership of my country of Israel, the governors, the priests, they're bad shepherds. They're like shepherds who aren't taking care of the sheep. They're slaughtering the sheep. They're roasting them and eating them alive like cannibals. They're not actually taking care of the sheep like they're supposed to be. And in those prophecies, God says, I myself am going to come down. I myself am going to shepherd my sheep. I'm going to lead them to good pastures. I'm going to take care of my people, because Israel's leadership was not doing it. Then you have Malachi at the end of the prophets, the final prophet of Israel, saying, the people of Israel had been crying out for their God to come back to them, for his glory to come back to the temple. And God says, yeah, I'm going to come back, but you haven't changed. You're still in your wickedness. You're still oppressing the poor. Yeah, when I come back, it's going to be in judgment. And there's a threat at the end of Malachi's prophecy that says, I'm going to send a prophet to you, kind of like Elijah, and if he doesn't turn the hearts of the fathers to their children, I'm going to strike the land with a curse, and it'll be cursed to destruction. Like he said earlier in the book about fire engulfing the priesthood and the temple, which is basically what Jesus reiterates. So all of those prophecies come together, the compassion and mercy of God and his promises, and the judgment and justice of God against oppression and wickedness and evil among his people. And they come together in this beautiful servant, the final servant prophecy, the suffering servant. In Isaiah 52 and 53, you have this portrait of God saying, I'm going to send a servant, and he's going to be afflicted. He's going to take my anger. He's going to be called afflicted by God and crushed by him. And he's going to take the sin of my people upon himself, and he's going to bear that sin to rescue the people, basically to take care of the curse so that the blessings of God can overflow not only in Israel, but through Israel to the rest of the nations. And so that prophecy, I think, is one of the more cryptic ones, but it's really cool to see how Jesus embodies the answer to all those and the fulfillment of all those prophecies. So the first thing that convinces me the most out of anything else is the eyewitness testimonies to Jesus Christ's resurrection from the dead, which is a little odd in today's video camera society, where I'm actually relying on eyewitness testimony coming through letters from people that lived 2,000 years ago. But actually, it is quite compelling to me, not simply the letters themselves that say, Peter and John and Paul wrote, but also the history from the Christian historian Luke, what he records in the Acts of the Apostles, and the lifestyles of these men. It's not that they were in a really nice environment and had this cult following and got a lot of money and women or whatever. Pretty much all of them lost their lives. They were persecuted. The Christian church was persecuted pretty much from the very beginning, first from the Jews, then from the Romans. And as they're witnessing, they're basically choosing a missionary lifestyle. So, Paul moving around, constantly working himself so that he can tell people that he's not asking for money. He's just trying to tell them about what he's seen and heard. And also the early church, it's amazing to me that Jesus' mother and his brothers were highly involved in the early church. In fact, one of Jesus' brothers was one of the leaders of the Jerusalem church for a decade or two, which is crazy if you think about it. Like, if you have a group that's deifying someone, typically the immediate family is not going to deify their brother, right? And the other thing is just that this is not like some group that like gradually over the decades started deifying a martyred leader. It's a unanimous witness right away from everyone that they'd seen the specific resurrection appearances of Jesus Christ. So it's, I think, very different from some of the other cases where you have a leader who's gradually been deified by their followers. Specifically, I think the testimony of John, who was exiled on an island. He was the only one of the original 12 who wasn't martyred, but he lived the rest of his life in exile. His testimony, as he writes in 1 John chapter 1, he says, this is stuff that we've seen and heard. Our hands have touched, our eyes have seen. This is what we are testifying to you. Peter, 2 Peter 1, he says, we're not following cleverly invented stories. We ourselves heard and saw this. And Paul goes to great lengths kind of going through all, he says, hey, Jesus appeared to the 12 disciples. He appeared to James. He appeared to about 500 Christians, most of whom are still alive at the time he was writing. And he appeared last of all to Paul as one untimely born. Paul at the time was persecuting Christians. He was a Jew and very strongly anti-Christian, and Jesus appears to him on the road to Damascus, changes his life around. Then Paul goes and becomes a missionary, and that's essentially why Christianity started spreading like wildfire throughout the Roman Empire, so that by the 3rd century you have tons of people in the Roman Empire becoming Christians because Paul gave his life to moving around the Roman Empire to spread the message about Jesus. So that's what convinces me personally. Primarily the eyewitness testimony that Jesus was resurrected from the early church community, and the letters from Peter and John and Paul, and also secondarily the beauty and power of Israel's prophecies and how they all find resolution in Jesus convinces me that Jesus is Israel's Messiah and the Savior of the human race. Well, that is a wrap for the final episode of the 2020 to 2021 school year of the Campus Salt Show. We hope you enjoyed it. If you're interested in being in the loop in what's happening in the Christian community at Bellingham Technical College, I would just encourage you to go to our website, btcsalt.org, and subscribe to our email newsletter, which throughout the school year is sent out regularly. And we're going to take a break for the summer, so we will be back in the fall. Hope you enjoy your summer.